So the theme this month is cars that were once worth the price of a riding mower are now worth more than your house. Let's get started. So this is a 2002 Honda S2000. And just like I mentioned, some of them can be worth more than your house. Now this particular one may not be, but there are several that are, and I'll show you guys some pictures here in a minute. This one came in for some supposed engine noises. It also came in for an exhaust leak, and it also came in with steering issues. The steering was getting tight. I'm going to show you guys what fixed it. This one is not in showroom condition. It is in kind of like a drift car. It's made for some serious racing or drifting or something like that. And these cars are very excellent at that. Let's go ahead and take a look around this car, although it's not very big. This thing has a pointy nose, Mrs. Wizard.
It is quite sharp.
You can see that it's had some little bruises on the front. Maybe they have been drifting this car. I don't know what they do with this car. I just know that they wanted a few things looked at and repaired. But it definitely looks like it's been around the block, or maybe around a cul-de-sac or something a few times. Who knows? These fenders here have been pulled out, maybe to put some wider tires or something like that on it, or lower the vehicle. There's a dent here. And if you look along the rocker molding, there's like a blade or a rocker plate made by Top One Motors. And the wheels are in decent shape. They're scuffed up a little bit, but they're okay. You can see what appears to be a large wheel spacer there to get the wheels moved out. And they have completely done away with the inner fender here and put in a wheel arch in order to fit that wheel at its lowered stance. As we arrive at the back, it kind of looks like a Miata, Mrs. Wizard.
Yeah, it definitely has that, maybe that little car look.
It's a little larger than a Miata, but not a whole lot. It does have some dual exhaust pipes sticking out kind of far, actually. It looks like something from the inside out pushed. Maybe they closed the trunk down on something sharp. Again, we have our wheel arches and aftermarket wheels. There's our Top One Motors rocker aerodynamic blade. I'm not sure even what you call that thing. Has a convertible top. It doesn't look like it's ripped or torn. It's in decent shape. And down this side looks pretty good. And again, we have the inside of the wheel arches pulled out for more clearance. Let's go ahead and open the long hood on it. There's a lot of length in this engine bay, although the engine's not very long. This is definitely a very special engine. It's a 2-liter engine, and it has 240 horsepower, but the really key thing here is the RPM. These things rev as high as Hoovy's 458 Ferrari. 9,000 RPMs, around about that area. They rated at 240 horsepower, like 83 or 8,400 RPMs. These things scream up to the red line, which is a very high red line. And it has about 155 pounds of torque, again at over 7,000 RPMs. Most engines that we deal with on a day-to-day basis don't even dream of RPMs that high. This is not a low RPM grunting, tugging, torquey motor. This is a high RPM screamer, very similar to a Ferrari engine. These are known to be a little noisy with the injectors and all the timing chain system on it. There's nothing wrong with this engine. It just makes kind of a clattery noise. I did some research on it and talked to one of my friends, and he said he knows a guy that owns 10 S2000s, and all of them make that noise. So that's not something we're going to worry about, and the customer doesn't have to worry about it either. You can see a forward brace that's in front of the engine. That's actually where the steering rack mounts. If that weren't in the way, you could probably fit an inline 6 in here or something, but really this thing puts out good power for the weight. And you can see it has a K&N air intake on it, a cold air intake. which I'm not a big fan of. You're supposed to, you guys know you're supposed to service these with oil. Look at it, it's dry as a bone. No one ever services them. We'll recommend to see if they would like us to do it. Even with that structural member in front of the engine, there's still a lot of room. You could get to the water pump and the belt and everything really easy. So this engine's not going to be one to make you really mad to work on it. It's actually very easy. Let's let Mrs. Wizard give you guys a tour of the interior.
Okay, ladies and gents, here we are. There's our gauge cluster, and you can see it says 159,000 miles. I think they've earned some of those miles with this car, but isn't this a great looking gauge cluster? You can see that nice arching RPM that does max out at 9,000. Really fun little gas gauge and our heat gauge as well. Not too many cars like this look this way in the early 2000s. Kind of advanced for that time. As we slide over here, you'll see that we actually have an engine start push button. We do have the key over here, but we turn it on with our push button start over here. So that's definitely different. We didn't have too many of those also. Also have our radio control over here as well. Definitely not something we're used to, but again, helping us keep our, I can almost turn the volume up by just pushing the fingers right here. So not quite on the steering wheel, but helping out as best they can. As we look up here at the dash, with all those miles on it, nothing wrong up here. Looks great. Nice red vinyl up there. Everything in here, as we zoom out, you'll see it's quite red. Simple controls for our heating and cooling system. And behind the gray panel is our radio. So nice spot, nice hiding spot with a lovely S2000 in there as well. And obviously the best carbon fiber plastic made. It doesn't say it's a 6-speed by that shifter, but it is. So again, another fun drive in this car as well. Got just an elbow rest here. This is not open, but as we have with many two-seater cars, we have a little bitty storage part right here that does lock. Also have our power outlet, so I guess you can keep that phone charged as you're drifting around those corners. Seats are getting some age on them. So as we can see, some spots that are looking a little bit, wore, kind of showing some of the beige leather kind of behind that red that was painted on. But again, as we slide up, you'll see, even saw it from the outside, the inside plastic back window is looking great. I don't see any light shining through any of our convertible top, so it's all looking really good. So as we end up here at our steering wheel, not a lot going on in this car. It's pretty simple on the inside, but we don't need lots of creature comforts and crazy things going on here, because what we're really paying attention to is that tachometer up there and pushing those pedals on the floor. I'm curious what this looks like on the underneath. Let's get this up in the air.
All right, we'll take a look under the car. The first thing I notice right off the bat is the radiator core support has a little dent there. And that's not surprising, being that it's lowered. It's pretty low to the ground, so they're going to be hitting any kind of obstructions in the road or anything like that. So here's our steering rack, which is a good used steering rack. And we'll talk about that as soon as we're done looking at the underneath of the car. It has some adjustable Type 2 struts right there. It says Type 2. Brakes look good. Nothing loose, nothing leaking. Sway bar link is good. Go to this side. Brakes are good. Nothing loose. Sway bar link is good, and also the strut is dry. Here's the front of our little 2-liter Honda engine. Everything's nice and dry. It doesn't surprise me that it's a Honda. Here we are to the transmission, the 6-speed. It's also nice and dry. Here's our exhaust coming down. It looks like the catalytic converters may be missing because they have this O2 sensor, this little elbow. It kind of fools the rear O2 sensor, the catalyst monitor. There may be a small cat in there, really tiny, but this is enough here to keep the light from going on. Here's a nice girthy drive shaft. It looks to be aftermarket to me, but it works. Here's our muffler. Not a whole lot of belly pans or anything under here, Mrs. Wizard.
No, I wondered about that, being that it's so low to the ground.
We do see a lot of scrapes on the frame rail here, though. Very low to the ground. Here's our rear differential. Everything's nice and dry. Here's our charcoal canister, nice and tucked up out of the way. It looks like it's got some sort of spacers for these CV shafts because the wheels are so far out, so that's why they had to do that. And also we have this track bar here, or tie rod, whatever you want to call that. It is also aftermarket. CV shafts look good. The boots anyways. Nice dry strut. Sway bar link is good. Nothing loose. And brakes are good. Go to this side, brakes are good, CV boots are good, sway bar link is good, strut is nice and dry, nothing loose there. Here's our rear muffler. It goes into two. It's got little extender tips on it that stick out a little far, but that's the styling that the owner wants, and that's what they get. Everything looks pretty good under here, Mrs. Wizard, except for the scrapes.
Well, they must be, drifting around corners and not doing jumps, like in your Charger where we had, scrapage back here and up here, and yeah.
So I'll go ahead and get this thing on the ground. Get some good curls in.
That can't weigh more than 20 pounds.
No, but it's not worth much. It's no good anymore. It's a piece of trash. That's the steering rack that was in this car. And there are no new ones. You can't buy a new steering rack for this car. We found that out. The complaint was when they're steering left, it works. It's got good power steering. When they steer to the right, it's extremely tight. They really had to force it. Now, if you look at that steering rack, there's no power steering lines. It's electric, full electric power steering. That's kind of rare for the early 2000s. We really weren't getting into electric power steerings till after 2010 for most common cars. This one had it clear back in the early 2000s. On the end here is a little sensor called the torque sensor. And I talked to a few friends who are mechanics, and they said, "Oh, bro, it's the torque sensor." And like, no, it's not. "Oh, yeah, that's what it is. I'd put one in." Nope. And the reason why I knew it's not the torque sensor is because when the engine is off, the key is off. I have the keys in my pocket, but I still have, to the right, very serious binding. To the left, easy. So when you have the wheels at center, and you go to the left, it was easy. When you go to the right, it was binding really hard. We inspected the knuckles, the tie rods, the ball joints, everything was nice and free and easy. We actually undid the tie rods, and you could just flop the wheels back and forth easy. So I knew there's nothing left wrong but the steering rack itself. That one can go in the scrap pile. I did find a good used one on eBay. We installed it, fixed. It has beautiful steering now, all directions, all the time, key on, key off. It is smooth in all directions. So that's solved, and we normally don't do used parts that much, but in this case, there really was no option. There's no new ones. But luckily, I had a guaranteed one from eBay. It says guaranteed good or your money back, and they were right. It works perfectly. So we got that fixed. They complained about an exhaust leak. We didn't find any exhaust leak. You saw the exhaust is in good shape. It's not broken. There really is no leak. And they were concerned about engine noise, which is normal for this engine. Just has kind of a light clatter. We did check the valve adjustments on it. Everything was perfect. They didn't even need a valve adjustment. So the timing chain was fine. The tensioner was fine. Everything's fine. It's just normal for these engines to be a little bit more clattery and louder than what you would expect. So I mentioned to you guys, this car is now worth more than your house. Some of them are. What I'm talking about is S2000s in general, not this particular one. This one's been set up for drifting and everything else. It's still probably worth 20 grand sitting there like that. Here's one that is a 2008 with only 3,000 miles on it. $63,000. I got one more to show you guys. This is a 123 mile special CR edition, but look at that, guys. $200,000. Actually, Tyler from Hoovie's Garage told me back in his dealership days when he sold used cars, he actually bought one of these for $5,000. And he sold it on his lot for $8,000, and he thought he really scored. You fast forward 10 years and he realized he didn't score at all. He should have held on to it. You don't pick up one of these for 5 grand anymore. They're 30, 40, 100, 200. It's crazy, some of these cars, the way the values have jumped just in the last year or two. Think of all the cars that we've owned in the past that we sold and are like, yeah, I mean, it's never going to be worth much. And they very well can be. I really wish I would have kept my 1979 Camaro that I had in the military. It was black, it was really nice. I think I paid $2,500 for it. And I sold it later for maybe $500 more than that when I got out of the military. I was like, you know, it's an old Camaro, nobody's going to want those. And now they're 30 grand, 50 grand, 60 grand. I should have kept that car. And we all probably have that one car that we probably should have kept. So yes, Tyler at one time purchased an S2000 for the price of an expensive riding lawnmower. You're not going to anymore. But there's a lot of things going on in the shop. You can see behind me there's the Merkur. I'm saying it properly now, Merkur XR4 Ti. We're diving into it now. We've got a list to the customer. It's going to be over $4,000 in work. But like I mentioned before, you're not going to find nice ones of those anymore. It's worth putting the money into. The customer values that car. They've got the money to fix the car, and I'm happy to fix it for them. And just in case you're worried that the Levante behind me is Mrs. Wizards and it's broken, it is not. That is Hoovie's Maserati. That is the meth wagon, or whatever he calls it. That is a 2019 Levante. You guys can check out his channel. He's got videos all over about that car and the crazy things he experienced in buying that car. But if it has 100,000 miles, it was used as a mobile meth lab, and it's been beat hard, and it still runs fine, then the idea that Maseratis are junk is out the window, because Mrs. Wizard is going to last a long time based on that. So if you're curious what kind of tools that Junior might use to replace the steering rack on this S2000, check my Amazon affiliates link in the description below. We get a small cut and we really appreciate it. And make sure to hit the subscribe button, because there's a lot more cool videos to come. Thanks for watching.